Where did you get it?
Uh, Carolyn, my ex-wife, she was an Oriental rug specialist. She and her husband owned Massoud's Persian Rugs in Chattanooga for years.
Where were they located?
It was over near Hickson, and it was the only big one in town. And he was an Iranian, so he knew rugs very well. He was also a doctor in MD. So he got her in the rug business and sent her to New York and sent her to school, and she learned about handmade rugs.
So that one out there is a real deal.
Yeah, it's handmade. And
where at?
Well, there's different countries produce them. Of course, India, in that area, Turkey. They're made all over that area over there, and there's different prices. And the best ones are the old ones, the antiques.
Is that one antique?
No, those are new.
Okay. I know it was expensive.
But they start at a few thousand, $3,000 or $4,000 for a basic rug.
Yeah.
They do.
You don't think about rugs in an old house, but they're so important.
Yeah, they are.
They get the sound up.
They do, and they're handmade, hand woven. So.
Yeah. It reminds me of Raymond's house. Whenever I went to get my hair cut with him, he'd always have he had a big rug in the living room in front of the fireplace.
Raymond was a great decorator and had a great touch. We're talking about Raymond Woods, Ocoee Harris.
Yeah. In fact, he gave me that radio cabinet.
Yeah, Ocoee Harris Studio.
Ocoee Harris Studio.
Yeah.
He was one of the smartest people that I've ever met.
Well, Raymond was my oldest best friend. Raymond was 1 year older than I, and we went to the same elementary school, same high school, and my college roommate.
So that was 16 years?
Yeah. And since then, it's been my oldest best friend. And we haven't always lived in the same town, but we've always stayed in touch. And Raymond was probably one of the most unique individuals I ever met in my life. Raymond grew up over on Galt Street, relatively. His parents both had to work.
I've got a picture of you on the. Where was this taken?
That's where I lived. I lived on the East Inman.
Is that you in the stroller?
That's me in the stroller. And I lived on East Inman. And you go into the underpass, and up top of the hill on the right. And that was on the right before you got to what's called Sixth Ward.
What's there now?
The car lot.
The car lot. Is that so you're in the car lot facing this?
Inman. That's
and so across the street is that lot I got.
Yes, and that was
the fence is still there. The wall's still there, isn't it?
Part of the wall's still there.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And next to it was a beautiful old Kaywood home. Kaywood owned that house too.
Which is not there anymore.
It's not there anymore.
So Raymond lived on Galt.
Yeah, which is go up here and turn left by Vest Grocery.
Across from Vest?
Yeah,
in
that area.
Was that house still there?
It is, and it's still maintained. It was a rental house, but he grew up.
What do you mean a rental? Did he rent? Did his family rent?
His family had to rent it. I mean, they never owned. My parents were much better off than Raymond's parents in terms of financial.
You think that made him as smart as he was?
Well, growing up, when we went off to college, he majored in business because he said, I want to make some money. And then after going to school for several years, he got out. And he could get a job, and he could sell anything. He got a job in the National Cash Register.
He sold those 3-ply Xerox.
He was a natural salesman, and he made good money. He married his high school sweetheart, Carolyn Hughes. And she was a school teacher, so they made good money. Bought him a nice old Victorian home down below Chattanooga and lived that life for a few years. And he said, I'm not happy one day. He said, I don't want to work for the man.
Was that in the 60s?
By then, we were in the early 70s. He said, I'm going to go back to college and get a PhD and teach.
And he told me he had a major in business and a minor in psychology, or vice versa.
Business and psychology. He said, I want to go back to school, get advanced degrees, and teach. And he had a great job, owned a house. She was a school teacher. They had some money. So they sold everything and went back to college. She got another master's degree. He got a master's degree. And then he was looking to try to get in a PhD program. by that time they were running out of money. So they decided they would go wherever they could get a job. And her teaching or him, and he couldn't get a job. He wanted to teach at the university. And you really can't teach there unless you get a PhD. So the Great Recession hit in the 70s, and he decided he had to do something. So he never got to teach. They decided he didn't want to work for anybody, nobody. So he decided he would go cut hair. So he goes to Nashville, goes to hair school.
He told me that instead of finding the career he wanted to do, he found a career that matched his lifestyle.
That's exactly right. That he could control his
That he
time
could control.
and his people.
You know, when I went to get my hair cut from him, he was expensive.
Yeah,
I mean,
he cost 2 or 3 times what everybody in town.
It was $50, and he was a good psychologist.
Yeah,
so
he was great.
I would always say I'm going to see my psychiatrist get a haircut.
And it's cheap.
And yeah, a cheap psychologist, expensive haircut.
Yeah.
But whenever you'd pull in, you would not. In other words, the other person left 10 minutes before you got there. So your experience in getting your haircut was just you and Raymond.
One-on-one.
And it was whatever you wanted to talk about. It was your 50 minutes.
It was.
And so you didn't see anybody leaving. You just pulled up and you were there with Raymond. And then he'd have Coke or whatever you drank.
Right.
It would be there on the counter when you got there.
And get the best haircut in the world.
Best haircut in the world.
And he did that because he could control his space and his time.
Mm-hmm.
And when he first got out of school, he went back to Murfreesboro. He loved Murfreesboro. It's where we'd gone to undergraduate school. And he bought an old rundown house in the historic district and lived in one room while he worked on the rest of it as he got and opened a shop in part of it. Just like he did here.
Mm-hmm. Called the 802 or the 5.
Yeah,
the address.
It was named after the address.
Yeah, which is genius in itself.
Yeah.
Think about it.
It is.
Think about how genius that is.
Yeah. Raymond his IQ was through.
If you didn't believe he was one of the smartest people you ever met, you didn't know him.
No, you didn't. And one of the best read.
Oh, he knew everything. He'd give me homework. He'd read this. I'd have to come back and he'd ask me what I thought.
Yeah. He did that. He did that. But anyway, he stayed over there for 4 or 5 years and got back on his feet, fixed his house up. And he had a friend out in California named Bill Bible, who's from here. And he talked him into coming to California. He always wanted to go to California. He sold everything he had, went out there, rented space, tried to cut hair out there. It was too expensive. Mm-hmm. Stayed about a year or two. And his wife's mother owned the house on Norfolk Court.
Mm-hmm. Which is a coffee shop now.
Yes.
Called the...
Yes, and it makes me sick.
I can't go in there. I cannot. I don't want anything tainting my memory of Raymond.
I have to turn my head when I drive up
can't
Norfolk
do it.
Court.
I can't
look
do
at
it.
the parking lot.
I can't do it. They cut his tree. It's
It's sick.
And everybody that had their hair cut with him knows what we're talking
They
about.
do. But anyway, he stayed out there about a year, and his parents had retired and moved to Alabama, so they bought that house from her parents, and they financed it for them until they got to Norfolk Court. And he set up shop and built that business.
He told me he had 150 regular customers, and several of them were from Atlanta. They would drive down here. I'm sure it wasn't to get their hair cut. It was to get to vent to Raymond, because he would give you real good advice on whatever you were dealing with.
It was people who'd been here years ago that lived here and moved away. They'd come back to get their hair cut. And he even had the old timers, older than us, Clark Stanford, Warren Kaiser, all those kind of people went to Raymond.
Mm-hmm. And you know, I would go in there sometimes, and he would be wearing a tuxedo, literally, on a Saturday afternoon with red tennis shoes. And I said, one day I said, Raymond, I said, just curious, why are you wearing a tuxedo with red tennis shoes? And he said, I just want you to know that I respect you, and that these tennis shoes are a juxtaposition.
I've never met anybody like him.
I never met anybody like him.
And he definitely marched to his own drummer. He did it his way if I ever saw anybody do it.
For sure.
And he controlled his space and he controlled his time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he'd take that little boat, rowing boat.
Sculling.
Yeah.
Remember when he cut your hair, they'd lay you back and he had that poster on the ceiling of that guy doing the sculling?
Yeah. What is the appraisal in town, downtown? Right downtown, he's an appraiser. His daddy.
Oh, Robbie.
Robbie gave him that, I think.
I think he did.
Robbie gave him something up there. He'd take the parks all the time.
And he gave him his bicycle. He used to ride bikes, too.
Yeah. But Raymond, you know, he just controlled. I never saw anybody control every minute of their life like he could. He did what he wanted to do when he wanted to do it.
I wished I could be more like that, but it's a gift.
It is. And he was just...
He would tell you respectively, no.
Yeah, he was my oldest best friend, and we just, you know, he's just got a life full of memories.
Now, he lived over there next to Harry Johnson, right? And Gene Officer. And Gene Officer lived...
Yeah, Gene a block away.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did. That's where he was raised. But he gave up on wanting that money. He decided money wasn't everything, just as long as you got enough.
He told me one time, he said he was, when he was teaching school, I think he said, and he walked outside and he saw it. And I said, "What'd you see?" And he said, "I can't explain it, but when you see it, you'll know it."
That's right, you'll know it.
He said, "You'll quit going after money and you'll start going after lifestyle." And I said, "What if you can't afford lifestyle?" And he says, "You can afford the lifestyle you want in America because you don't have to worry about food, shelter, clothes." He always do his fingers like food, shelter, clothing.
He was very unique, very unique. I miss him so much.
I do too. I think about him 3 times a week. Mm-hmm. They didn't have a funeral or anything, did they?
Nothing. And I called his wife and asked her, you know, could you put something together?
He wouldn't have wanted that.
I don't think he'd mind if we'd have a little party for him.
We should do that.
Not the, he wouldn't want to take
just
a conventional
15
funeral.
people. He would not want a conventional funeral. So is it Presswood, are you related to Walter?
Walter's from Polk County, and my father came out of Tellico. And I think the world of Walter. He's got a great shop, and I visit with him often. But Daddy used to tell Walter's parents, now I'm from Tellico, I'm not even kin to y'all. Like, we might be distant kin. But when Daddy got old and they got old, he'd go to those Presswood, Polk County reunions up there in Polk County, but they weren't close.
But there was a distant relation.
There probably was. We
yeah.
didn't be checking into it. But
so was your daddy? I know you're a strong Democrat. Was he a strong Democrat?
He was. Of course, he grew up in Tellico, and when the Depression hit, he had a cab up there, a taxi cab.
In Tellico?
Tellico was booming in the 20s.
Now let me get this straight. You're talking about Tellico, Tennessee.
Yes.
It was big enough to have a taxi.
Well, the reason it had a taxi was you had a huge lumber company up there called Babcock Lumber that come out of the north, and they were cutting all that timber up there. That was before TVA.
Like what year?
20s, mid-late 20s.
After the Depression?
Before. And so the town was booming because of TVA wasn't there to protect the forest, or there wasn't no National Park Service. So private sector was up there cutting all the timber. And so you had these people up on the mountain, bunch of them. And then you had Conesaga down here on 411, a bunch of them. So they'd stay up there all weekend, and Daddy said on the weekend he could make more money than these 3 of them by running the cab.
Not a yellow cab like I'm thinking.
No, he had his own cab. I got a picture of it. Just an old black car.
So he was from Tellico.
Yeah. And he was in his mid-20s, late 20s. Yeah. He was born in 1904. So when they'd come out of the mountains on Friday, they'd be up all week with a paycheck and wanting to shower.
Come out of the mountains? You mean the...
Way on up.
Like North Carolina?
Well, up toward that way, yeah. up in there.
Yeah.
Monroe and maybe North Carolina. They'd come out of the mountains. They'd been up there all week. They were ready to party. And they had money.
Was there a place to party in Tellico?
Well, he would take them places. They'd take his cab. He'd take them wherever they wanted to go.
To the dives.
They'd take a shower. A lot of them, he said he made a lot of trips between Conasauga and Tellico. There was a bunch of people down there.
411, down 411 highway.
Yeah. So he said, I made more money on the week. I made more money than these three of them made working all week. And I've got a picture of him in his old cab.
So what possessed him to come down to Cleveland?
The Great Depression hit. And the Babcock lumber shut down. No work. And he had a sister living down here. So he moved down here about 30, 31. And met my mother in a few years. And would not work inside. Would not work inside of a building. Wouldn't work at the woolen mill. Had to be outside. Had to be in a vehicle, like a delivery, furniture, something like that. So he worked at Sturgis Brothers, delivering truck. And after a few years, World War II came along, and he was able to buy. He got a job at TVA when they were building one of the dams up there. When I was born, about 42.
A little bit before this picture.
Yeah. And he said, I made so much money I could save money for the first time in my life. TVA paid so well. He said, after 18 months, I had $1,000 saved. He'd worked for T. Lloyd McLean, who owned Pan Am Oil, before he went up there. Gas station. He delivered gas. He said, I went to T. Lloyd McLean and said, you couldn't borrow any money at the bank. And said, TL, I got $1,000. I don't want to buy no international truck. Would you loan me $1,000? And TL loaned me $1,000. So he bought one old international truck and he started moving people and hauling freight out of the backyard. By the time I came along, there were 4 trucks out there. So
delivery truck.
Those old international trucks with beds, and he hauled people, moved furniture, and hauled people, and hauled freight. He had a contract with the depot to go there and pick freight up and deliver.
So he was doing good.
Yeah, he did. He did very well. And they wouldn't put the money in the bank.
Nobody did that.
I've seen my mother in Sixth Ward with $10,000 or $12,000 in a penitentiary pocketbook wrapped in rubber bands.
What do you mean penitentiary pocketbook?
They used to make them and sell them to people. They'd carve on them.
Like license plates, but they were
leather. They were billfolds, but she wouldn't fold it. She kept it long. There's a man's billfold and put rubber bands around it. It's carved on it. The stuff they'd do like. And $10,000 or $12,000 back when you could buy 3 houses for that.
That'd be like $300,000.
It took them for years to put that in the bank. Never going to be broke again.
Because they had been through.
Never going to be broke again. So, and by the time I went to the 1st grade, I'd ridden all over Dixie with him in those old trucks. They were international trucks. They had 4 gears and a little red overdrive. And I slept in the front seat wrapped in a furniture blanket. When I got too big for it, I'd get in the floorboard and sleep. Before I went to 1st grade, I learned to read by reading billboard signs. And I can remember going up Mount Eagle Mountain loaded with him. And when we got ready to go down, I'd put that blanket over my head because I knew we were going down. We were loaded. But I rode all over the South with him, 4, 5, 6 years old.
2 years.
So I got too big to get in there.
Yeah. And until you had to go to school.
So, but he was a trucker. Now, to answer your question about a Democrat, he was also a hardcore Democrat. He grew up in the Depression. And I'm sure that had something to do with it. And, but he always thought the Democrat Party represented the working man. He always, and he was hardcore. He was precinct chairman at Allen School.
Precinct chairman. Vote? You mean where they voted?
Yeah. And he was active in the Democrat Party locally. He was chairman, vice chairman of it and stuff. But he ran Allen School precinct. And he'd take off from working a week before the election and worked that precinct. It was about half black and half white. And of course, that trunk would be full of half pints. And he was out there working for the Democrat Party. I used to ask him one time, I said, Daddy, you're awful hard on these people. How do you know you're right about this?
What people?
People who's getting the vote.
Yeah.
He could lean on.
Yeah.
And I'd say, well, how do you know you're right about this president? He said, I'm unsure sometimes. I said, well, how do you pick this side? He said, I look and see which way the big money goes, and I go the other way, because it's not in my interest. I just can't figure it out.
Is that still true today, you think?
Well, I think, I think the Democrat Party represents the working men more than the other party. I mean, what we have today, Social Security, Medicare, minimum wage, all those things, unemployment, all those things basically came from that party.
From the working class party.
Came from the Democrat Party.
Yeah.
Unions.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I guess it just depends on whether you're pitching or catching.
I guess, yeah. I guess it would depend on, too, if you're... Some people that are born rich seem to think that they're rich because they're smart, when all they did was inherit money.
Yeah.
But yet they think that people that are poor are somehow stupid. And I hear people say all the time, oh, no, they just don't work hard enough. But that's not altogether true. Some people just don't have the ability.
No, that's not true.
I mean, if you had to play the piano to eat, I'd starve. I can't do that.
Well, when you're down and out, it's hard to get up.
You can't be born with nothing, and unless you discover something,
mm-hmm.
invent something, or win the lottery,
mm-hmm.
you're just not going to get to that side where they're at. It doesn't matter. Now, I remember when I first started building, you could work hard enough and long enough to get ahead, but it's become the point where that doesn't really matter how hard you work. You just still can't get even.
You're right. Let me just follow up on the political parties. When I say I'm a Democrat, that's on the national level. I don't look at local elected officials as Democrats.
Shouldn't even be.
It's not. They shouldn't even be running on
totally irrelevant.
They shouldn't even be running on a party level.
Shouldn't even be on the thing.
No, not locally.
Yeah, it means nothing.
Nothing. So I don't vote locally. If I know somebody, I vote on. Doesn't matter to me what party they are. But at the national level, I don't know them,
mm-hmm.
so I have to go by what kind of platform or what positions they take.
That makes sense.
And like locally, doesn't matter if it's all Democrats or all Republicans. You could put Jesus Christ and a D by his name in Bradley County and get beat.
He's not going to win.
Not going to win.
And even if he's the better person.
And they shouldn't have to run with a label on.
That almost puts them at a disadvantage.
Well, you can't. I mean, it's you're denying a lot of qualified people an opportunity to win. And being a Democrat or Republican has nothing to do with how good you are on the city council or county commission.
They're not going to vote for something because they're Republican or
because those are everyday issues that we all face here. It doesn't even get into party. Now at the national level, you got to have a party.
Sure,
but not local.
I wonder that. And if you ran independent, you wouldn't get the support.
No, you couldn't.
So you have to choose.
And the ones that were Democrats, knowing that they wanted to win, they've all switched parties. Half the people in the courthouse used to be Democrats. Mm-hmm. They had to switch to R to win.
Just to win.
And it doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't mean anything. It's just a stupid argument.
It is.
Did you when you went to school with Raymond in Murfreesboro?
Mm-hmm.
What was your graduation? What'd you major in?
I majored in political science. And when I left there, I went to UT Law School for law.
Mm-hmm. Was you going to be a lawyer?
I went up there, and I was, that's what I wanted to be. But it was a time in my life. It depends on your mood and where you are, and it was summertime.
Sure.
I just split from my girlfriend, and I just couldn't. I started taking courses, and I was up there a couple of quarters, and I thought, contracts, real estate. I got to go back to Cleveland, Tennessee, and hang out the shingles and do wheels and contracts. It didn't sound too exciting.
Yeah.
I didn't realize at the time that once you get through there, all it is a broad-based, good liberal arts education that you could use in any field. You didn't have to come back and hang out a shingle and do that. But I didn't know that.
Nobody told you. That's the problem with our education.
I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
I didn't have a dad who'd been an attorney. So I dropped out, and I came back to Cleveland, and you can't stay at my father's house unless you get a job. That's number one.
That was his rule.
Yeah, and number two, if you're there and you've got a job, you've got to pay room and board. Whether you're 18 or 28 or whatever you are, that's 2 rules. So I came back, and I didn't know what I was going to do, and I picked up the paper one day. It was 1967. And it basically said, if you've got a BS degree, call Grace Carroll down at Bradley County School Superintendent. They got an opening for teachers. So I went down there and interviewed. She said, go out to North Lee Elementary and see Daniel Davis. That's Judge's brother, older brother.
Gary's older brother.
So I go out to North Lee Elementary. And he interviews me and says, I've got an opening for an 8th and 7th and 8th grade PE teacher and a health teacher. And your classroom is the gym stage. That's how overcrowded it was. And Bradley had bad footballs. They were going down in football, so they had started the Bear Booster Club. And the 7th and 8th graders were playing tackle football under the lights at Bradley. He said, you got to also be the boys' football coach and the boys' basketball coach and the girls' basketball coach. And make a long story short, I took it. So I went up there and I lasted about 3 or 4 months. I coached the football team and knew I didn't want to do that the rest of my life. And I started looking around for something else to do. And I saw an ad in the Chattanooga paper for an urban planner, beginning urban planner 1. So I went there and interviewed for it and I got the job.
Which you had the education for, right?
I had a BS degree for an urban planning job. So that was a starting job. Well, I liked it. So they had a program then, back then. They didn't have many people with masters in urban planning. They had a program where they would send you to a master's program, and they would pay you tuition and books, and pay you $500 a month. It took 18 months year round to get it. And once you got it, you had a job back with them, and you got a much higher raise. And then you were eligible for even higher jobs. So I went back and got my master's in urban planning. They sent me to Nashville, and I worked over there a couple of years, and all of a sudden one day, Mayor Harry Deathrow called me. That's how I
Now, was you married when you was in Murfreesboro?
Not with Raymond, not back in school. I'm talking about...
When you went to Middle Tennessee, when you got your master's?
Yeah, I was married, married with a child.
Yeah.
And so they sent me to Nashville. So I'd been with them 5 or 6 years, and I was doing well. And Mayor Harry Deathrow in Cleveland.
I've heard that name my whole life.
He was here for 17 years. Well, when I was 18, just out of high school, he was VP of sales at Magic Shelf. And his wife was a Deathrow. That was Skeet's sister. And he had a little office down there, just right below Old Princess Theater. They just bought Magic Shelf, and they were combining the Magic Shelf and Dixie Family Sales Force in 1960. So I went down there, didn't know him, applied for a job, be his office errand boy, go get the mail, collect the catalog. He hired me that summer. So I got to know him. Well, years later, he became mayor. And I was a city planner, and I'd run into him once a year at conventions. And he was always nice to speak to me and talk to me. So one day he called me. But then, by then I'd been promoted again. I was in Cookville when I was over in office. He said, Larry, I want you to come home and work for me. I want you to be my sister. That's what brought me back.
Well, how old were you then?
I moved back here in 75, so I was 32 or 3. And it was the best 7 years of my life working for him. He was a wonderful human being.
Now, Eddie Cartwright was here.
Eddie was on that city council.
That's right. He said he hired you, but I guess it meant he was on the city council.
He did. Well, they had to vote for it, but
He speaks very highly of you.
Well, the mayor brought me here, and the city council, I worked with him, stayed with him 7 years.
In the city of Cleveland, what did you do there?
We didn't have a city manager, and I was like the mayor's administrative assistant, and I was over community development. I built a community development staff where we did all of our planning in-house. We got all the grant money. We built Tinsley Park. We created Paul Huff Parkway. Mm-hmm. We did annexation studies. We did all the planning for the city. And
so you were in essence working as the city manager.
Well, we didn't manage the police or fire. Uh-huh. We didn't have anything to do with police or fire operations.
So like a half city manager.
Well, what we were controlling was planning and development. What happened?
Mm-hmm. What's going to happen?
Yeah, that's right. And we had the plans to show it. If they wanted a new school, we picked the site. They wouldn't ride around in the car looking at one.
Yeah.
If they do a planning study and look at all the potential sites where we should go.
Now they just drive around and see who's got an area big. So y'all actually took a cohesive approach to.
We tried. We did a big annexation study of Dorothy Elementary. That whole area out there was outside the city. They needed sewers.
Sequoia Grove.
All that. They needed sewers. They needed a new school. The school was too small. Mm-hmm. And if we built a new school, it wouldn't even affect the county. So we had an annexation study done, and we talked to Eddie and the mayor and everybody. And they said, yeah, we need to annex a bunch of people, about 1,500 people. And they fought us tooth and toenail. They didn't understand. Mm-hmm. We went out there and talked to them. They didn't like it, but we annexed them. But the mayor told them in the speech out there, when you come in, we're going to build you a new school. We're going to put sewers in here. We're going to fix this area up. You're urban. You're not rural anymore. You need urban services. Mm-hmm. And we did. The new school was E.O. Ross.
E.O. Ross, yeah.
We picked the site.
Because I lived in West Eldridge Acres on Mascot. I remember those days.
And we picked the school, E.O. Ross. And
they would picket. Didn't they have people out there picketing?
They were mad. But they were so happy 5 years later. Mm-hmm. They had a new school. The neighborhoods got improved. They just couldn't see it.
Well, now it's the place to be. So y'all were, evidently your direction was correct.
And that's the last time, I guess, the school's been picked by a plan. It's turned out to be a pretty good site.
Oh, it's the best place. It's rated as the best school.
And with Joe Edwards, city engineer, and he was a tremendous amount of help. With Joe Edwards' help, we built Paul Huff Parkway.
Which is a must. We had to have it.
We asked the state to do a feasibility study of Harrison Pike. We called that interchange out there back then Valley Head Corridor.
I bet nobody knows what that means now.
Valley Head Corridor. And then they named it later. But we asked the state to look at each one. They had to do a cost-benefit analysis. Mm-hmm. And they came back, because there's more vacant land out there, and said this one's more economically productive than the other one. And then by that time, we'd been thinking about Harrison Pike. And then we realized we didn't want one at Harrison Pike, because that would have poured all that traffic right through downtown.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want downtown is through traffic, because you got to be pedestrian oriented.
It's set to slow down too much.
Yeah, there's too much traffic going through there. Mm-hmm. So we went after Paul Huff.
It was a great success, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
So how was Harry Deathrow as a mayor?
He was a gentleman and a scholar. He was well educated, Vanderbilt graduate, private high school in Bell Buckle. His father had death row cleaners down here. They were very, very nice people, and he was well educated, and he was a great leader, because he knew how to work with Eddie and Tim Tinsley and Max Carroll. That's who I worked for. Max Carroll, Eddie, Tinsley, Buckner.
Ralph Buckner.
He was a good guy. They were 5 in the mayor, or 4 in the mayor. Mm-hmm. And he knew how to work with them, and they all got along good. And we kept them fully informed on what we were doing. And we were very good at getting grants. Joe Cate.
Yep.
Joe Cate, I heard Joe Cate out of college.
Mm-hmm.
And he got $1 million grant to build that fire hall #1 down there. Didn't cost us a dime.
The one downtown.
Yeah, the one.
Yeah.
We were right on top of those grants and stuff. So we were happy with them, and I think they were happy with us.
Well, what made you quit
Carl Hoskins. Remember Carl?
I remember him. He had a red and black checked office. Is that right?
Carl Hoskins had Hoskins Land Company.
Yeah.
And he was a true entrepreneur. I mean, he owned the radio station. He owned cable TV. He had more properties, real estate.
Well, what was his original? Where'd he come from?
He came from Harlan, Kentucky.
Just moved to Cleveland?
He was up there in Harlan, Kentucky, buying up old rental property, real dirt place, working for GE, General Electric. Mm-hmm. Had a sales job with him. Excuse me. His wife's parents were from Cleveland. They had the original farm down there on Dalton Pike.
I remember that. They auctioned that off several years ago.
They
didn't they?
All right. That land, where that land sit, his wife's parents had it from a land grant when the county was formed in the 1830s. So his wife always wanted to come back here and build down there and buy that land and build on it.
Before Rat's time. Remember the guy that from Polk County that they always call anything before 1858, before Rat's time.
Really? I hadn't heard that one.
Oh yeah, I've got his book. You never read that book?
No.
You got to read that book.
But anyway, his wife wanted to come back. So in the early 40s, he bought the land down there. And in the early 50s, they moved down here and built a house down there. And he went in town and opened up his real estate development company.
A lot of times you'll see old deeds that say part of Hoskins Land Company.
Yeah.
So he wasn't a fly-by-night.
No. And he was he was real shrewd, and he got into subsidized housing. He had 700 units of subsidized housing scattered all over.
He was the former what we know as Carl Collins.
That's correct. That's correct. And he is. That's just one thing he did. He owned a radio station. He had cable TV here. And I looked after about 20 different pieces of properties that he owned all over town.
What'd you do? Collect the rent and pay the property taxes and do the maintenance?
I didn't pay any property. We had bookkeepers. But my job was to build new multifamily housing through Section 8, because I dealt with that city and knew something about the feds and about THDA and about how you get that stuff, how to do the applications. And my job was to do that and look after these units and find any developments that we want.
What did he do? Come to you and say, I want to hire you?
He was after me for a year to go to work for him. He was getting old. He had his son, Jim. And Jim was a nice guy, but he was sort of introverted. And he managed all the units. He had manager stuff. He needed an outside guy like him. He was the opposite of Jim. He was very extroverted. And he wanted me to sort of pick up and do some of that subsidized, get new projects and stuff. And he offered me a good deal. And it took me about a year, but I eventually took it.
Was that hard quitting this?
Very hard leaving him there. He had 3 more years. And I was so spoiled, I didn't think I wanted to work for anybody else. And I thought, well, I'd go. But I went, and he lived about 3 years after I got there. He got sick and died. And I stayed the other 4. I stayed about 7 or 8 years.
Well, who'd you work for when he was dead? Like the family?
Well, it was Jim and I. I mean, I had part interest in Hoskins Land Company. He created. Now he had all kinds of stuff. I didn't have part interest in everything he had. He had housing, but he put everything that was individual, like all the buildings and stuff, in a new entity, and I had 35% of all the individual properties, not the big complexes.
Yeah.
And there were about 20 of them. In fact, we had a little real estate company, and we almost shut it down because nobody wanted to run it. And they said, you know anybody that might want to run it? And I said, yeah, Eddie Botts.
Eddie Botts.
So we come down there and gave him an opportunity. Hoskins and Botts.
What was Eddie Botts? Was Eddie? He was with the city.
Yeah, but he left and gone with Bender before I left the city.
Oh.
So when we decided, Carl and Jim said, we're going to have to shut down. And Jim said, we're going to you don't want to run no broker's gun. I said, no. He said, well, Carl always had a little broker's gun. He might just do his own stuff, you know, and stuff. Yeah. And he said, do you know anybody might want to run it? He'd been out been there a couple of years, and I said, yeah. I called Eddie, come down here. They offered him a deal, offered him the salary. Gave him half interest in it. No. Hoskins and Boss.
I remember that name.
That's how he got his start.
That's right, Hoskins and Boss.
That's how he got his start.
So you were there from seven or 8 years. Then what?
Then I went down to, I got back in government. I went down to Albany, Georgia as planning director.
Did you apply for a job or that?
I sent my resume. There's national groups where you can, planning groups where you can put, you find out the openings, you send your resumes around.
So how long was you there?
I was there about 3 years. I didn't like Southwest Georgia. Too hot.
It's just different.
Hot and humid. Hot and humid.
Hard to beat South Cleveland, Tennessee.
It is. It is.
So then what, Larry?
I came back home and said, well, I've had this for my own, and I decided I wanted to get in commercial real estate. So I went down to Chattanooga and I worked for George Elder Real Estate, commercial real estate, for about 2 years. I wanted to try to pick his brain in Chattanooga. And then I came up here, Lord, 97. How long was that then? I'd opened my own company.
How old were you then? So how long did you sell for the elder guy?
Year and a half, 2 years. I just wanted to pick his brain, see what was going on down there, and learn a little bit about commercial real estate. And I didn't want to sell houses, and there wasn't nobody in town just doing commercial.
Why not sell houses?
I ain't poor. It's not my bag.
Too emotional. People are too emotional.
It's not my bag of tea.
Yeah.
I just want to do commercial, and nobody in town was just doing commercial. I mean, Lloyd and all them were doing a lot of it. They were doing other stuff too. So I've been. That's 97. That's what 23 years.
So you just been in commercial real estate?
Yeah, just been around for 23 years. Yeah. And that's pretty much it.
So back to the Democrat Party. Did you always stay?
Well, I'm lucky. I'm lucky. The old man was a Democrat, and then after 7 years of school, beyond high school, I happened to end up on the same side. It wasn't necessarily because of him, but my education gave me a tendency to go that way too. Thank God. Bill
Harris used to tell me, if you live long enough, you'll be a Democrat.
Well, I mean, there are good people in both parties, and I know all that. But just taking political science courses and going to college. Of course, I grew up in the '60s.
Yeah,
that's another thing.
I guess you could say you're an old hippie, right?
Yeah.
Were you a hippie?
Well, I never was what you'd call a true hippie. I didn't go to Woodstock, but I mean, I sympathize with him and I empathize with him.
Which is what is their thing?
Peace, love, compassion.
That was all the '60s.
And they were opposed to the war, and I was opposed to the war.
You were too old, right?
Well, I was lucky when I was 20 years old, before I went back to college. Raymond and I went to college when we were 21 and 22. So when I got out of high school at 18, I'd have a job at the foundry. I'd last 6 weeks. I'd have a job at the Cherry Factory 6 weeks. The old man was driving me crazy. So I joined the Army Reserves and went active duty for 6 months in '62. So I didn't have to worry about the draft when I went off to college in '63.
I see.
In fact, when I got back from the Army, he got me a job at Olin. I was in the second hire up there. And after about 6 months or a year, I had a '57 Chevy paid $400,000. And I was riding around with Raymond at night. And Raymond had a white-collar job at Maui. He'd gone and got a year of business degree in Atlanta with Johnny Watson.
I remember Johnny.
And they were a year ahead of me, and they had white-collar jobs like what I call time and motion studies. And we'd ride around at night, and he'd come and say, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. And I said, I don't want to do what I'm doing the rest of my life. Then we started talking about going to school. I said, well, I went to UT when I was 18. I didn't know the world was around, and it was too big. I don't want to go back up there. So we decided to go to Middle Tennessee. He quit his job, and I quit mine. I thought my dad was going to kill me. He said, the best job you'll ever have in your life. You better stay up there.
Yeah. That would have been a good job.
It was a good job, but I didn't want to do it. So we went off over to learn. We really were seeking knowledge. Mm-hmm. What's the world like? What makes it tick? So and we took a lot of courses together in like logic, philosophy, philosophy of religion. You know, Raymond was a deep thinker even then.
Oh yeah, very deep. Very deep. He used to say, I don't know.
Yeah. That's right.
So after the I was going to ask you about this too. Have you seen these over behind Staples? There's a whole city of people living over there.
I have.
What I remember several years ago, me and you and George McCorn walked down to where on Inman where there was a city camp there. And remember we walked down there and they had the tents and stuff. Mm-hmm. But now they're gone, so now they've moved behind Staples. I don't know. That seems awful crazy. Somebody's sitting there. And I'm sitting home at night watching TV and thinking, are they sitting outside in a tent?
Homelessness is a problem in this country, period.
It's not just Cleveland.
No, it's everywhere. And
was that always? I mean, you talk about back in the 20s.
No, you didn't see it.
Well, where were they at?
You know, that's a good question. That's a good question.
I mean, where were they? We can't be that much different than they were then.
Well, first of all, we're a lot bigger community, and they probably were homeless in bigger communities. See,
I guess.
You know, even then, I think there's always been homeless the bigger the town.
So you think the smaller the town, the less the homeless? Yes. And why is that?
Because you get less people.
But
I mean, there's more homeless in Chattanooga than there are in Cleveland.
But do they just decide not to be homeless here, or is it more of an embarrassing thing and they're not homeless, or is it that we just... I mean, did we have homeless per capita then we do now, or is it just...
I mean, I would surmise that the larger the community, the more homeless you're going to have. So when I was a kid growing up here, you rarely saw somebody sleeping on the street.
If you did, what would you have done then?
You'd go back and tell your mama, and she'd try to find out who it was, and if you had any relatives or something, you know.
Try to help them.
But it was very, very rare.
But we see them today, they don't think nothing about it.
Well, I really think that's the kind of issues that local government should be addressing.
And what could they possibly do?
Well, I mean, I haven't done any research on it, but I'd find out what they're doing around the country. I'd do some research, and I'd...
You mean find a city was successful in it?
See what options are out there. You know, there's got to be a better way than, you know, you can't have it out like that. It hurts business. It hurts the community to have them out there. And you don't need to put them in jail.
No.
That's $50 a night. No, taxpayers paying for every one of them.
Answer.
So why can't we create some kind of environment, some kind of temporary hole where we can put them?
We got the emergency shelter.
Well, you can get 10 people in there. I mean, maybe 15.
And I think they have a time limit, like
they do,
a week or something like that.
I mean, they've just got to.
And it's emergency.
There's got to be. I mean, you know, I hadn't worked in government in years, but I guarantee you, you know, you can. I mean, it's an issue I think local government should address.
And I don't know how they'd solve it. I really don't.
Well, they just.
But have you noticed that there's more?
There's a lot more because we're a bigger community. This community's 50,000, 60,000 more people here now than there was when I was a kid. That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people. But I just don't know what you could do about the homeless. I hate it that they're living like that, but maybe they want to live that way.
Well, I don't think anybody chooses to live that way. They've got problems, whether it's drugs or this or that, and some of them don't even do drugs.
No.
Some of them are just off here.
Yeah.
I saw Miss Emma, which I've known for years, living in a car down there, right in front of boys' new that new development downtown across from the hills.
And she's not nowhere near.
She and her mama living in a car. God. She's off up here. So you got mental problems too. That's
yeah.
another thing. You gotta.
So you're saying there's got to be a community out there that has handled it successfully.
Well, at least they're addressing it.
Yeah.
You know, they're trying to address it, and if they need mental help, try to get them mental help. They need this, try to get them that. You know, and house them at least temporarily. And they don't need to be out here like you're talking about, affecting businesses and their business and stuff.
Yeah, it just seems so sad that there is a literal trail where they walk down. And I know the businesses call the police, and the police come, and I don't know what they do, but they don't stop it, so I don't know.
You know, I saw something interesting about all this problems they're having in Minneapolis and everywhere. They use the word defund. That's not the right word.
I don't think they're wanting to use that word.
They're not really. I mean, people are using that word, but that's not what they mean. What they mean is, instead of sending a policeman for every incident, have some support staff for them. Have somebody that's in the mental health field. Have somebody.
In other words, if somebody calls 911 and says we got a murder, send the police. If they call and say, hey, we got a homeless guy, send a social worker.
Well, you can have these people housed in the police department. They're just not policemen. Support staff to help them in these areas. You don't need cops going out here to these homeless. It's a waste of time.
They don't need to be. And the police have an attitude that's different than a social worker.
They do.
Right.
And I'm just using that one example, but there's other things. You know, have support staff for those people that knows a social worker or a mental health person that can help them get in the right areas to get some help.
So you're saying that how would you divide up the police? What exactly are they talking about when they say defund? You know, we say they're not trying to defund it.
I think they're trying to diversify it. In other words, what little bit I know is what I've read in the paper. Minneapolis, where the problem happened, and other big cities are starting now to look and say, well, maybe a policeman is not the best thing to call in every 911 situation.
On every 911. That makes all the sense in the world to me.
And maybe they should have some support staff at the police department, such as people in different fields like mental health.
Maybe even domestic disputes.
Yeah, and somebody with a gun is not the answer in every situation.
You can get pulled over by the policeman and they're reaching your gun. All you did was run a yield sign. I mean,
and the other thing too is, you know, when I left the city in '81, and I'm guessing the city was about, and I'm close, was about 24,000 people.
Which is what now?
Today, I think it's about 42, 44.
So twice as much.
Close. And somebody can confirm this, and I might be off a little bit. I think there was about less than 40 in the city police department. 37, 38, memory goes right. Today, there's 20,000 more people, and there's 126.
In the city or the county?
City alone.
City police.
And then at the same time, the county had about 15 or 20. Now they got 250.
You know,
I'm guessing.
You almost would feel intimidated just by the sheer numbers of them, right?
Well, I mean, especially if you're poor and live over on Wildwood and you pass 7 of them trying to go 6 blocks.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
it just doesn't make. So maybe the idea of, you know, that's a good idea. They shouldn't call it defund. That hurts their cause. Diversify.
And I'm not sure if the people opposed to it, the one that calls it defund or not. I don't know what it.
If you called it diversify, you get more traction out of it than defund. I don't think they're calling it defund.
But I think the people opposed to the idea
call it defund. Yeah, and that's
like they're going to cut their budget.
Yeah,
and the big cities are now starting to look at all what you're talking about. How best can we handle these different kind of crises, and who should we send?
Yeah, they should not send the police over. I mean, I guess that's all we've got right now.
Well, I mean, you can send one with them, but take that mental health girl and let her, you know.
Yeah, because she might be trained for that.
Yeah.
The policeman's trained to shoot and kill, and what's the law about passing a stop sign or not passing a stop.
I mean, you need both.
But if you run up on a stop sign and you do the double stop, and they pull you over and give you a ticket, and then you get 2 more in 6 months, they may suspend your license. How does that make sense?
I mean, unfortunately, if you're down and out, it is nearly impossible to get back on your feet.
Because of that sort of stuff? Or?
Yeah, but I mean, you take these young kids or people on drugs. They're nonviolent. They never hurt a flea except themselves. Mm-hmm. And I've got a guy who's one of the best, most talented carpenters. A small engine repair can do anything. Learning in prison 3 or 4 different times. And he'll come out. He's back out right now. They sent him back over there because he couldn't make bond or something. Couldn't pay his bond.
Has nothing to do with being a criminal.
He's back out again. No driver's license. Can't get one because he owes $2,200. So he can't get to work. I mean, the system is rigged against him.
I mean, he has no money, obviously.
Right. And he's living with his aunt. She gives him a place to live. She has to haul him where he wants to go if he gets a job with me.
I've got this guy that works for me. If he didn't work for me, I don't know what he'd do. He can't get a driver. He's like this guy. He can't get a driver's license. He can't get a job anywhere. He can't get a job to get the money to pay it. And once a week, he has to go during the middle of the day and pay the parole guy money and then comes back to work. I don't understand what he's even doing, but he's literally got to leave the job, go pay the payroll guy, or what do you call him? Parole guy, $50, and comes back to work. What's that for?
It's an endless cycle you can't get out of, and the government makes it too hard on them. There's got to be a better way.
Not hard, impossible. These people that have.
Now he got out a couple of years ago, and when he goes over, he learns a new skill and come back this time. He's a small engine repair specialist. Mm-hmm. And he's a great worker and very talented, good carpenter, and will work. Mm-hmm. But he gets out and he gets bored. I mean, he gets so depressed. Can't get his license, can't do anything. And after a while, he'll go back hanging out with that crowd.
Could you imagine if we left here and if you couldn't drive home? Yeah. I mean, we take that for granted. But think about it. If I had to drive you home when I left here, I'd just quit bringing you here. Right. To be honest.
Right.
And so the next thing...
And I've worked the guy, and I have to take him all the way back to his aunt's way out in the country. So how's he going to make a living? If he owes them, why can't he set it up on $50 a month or $100 a month and give him a temporary license and let him work and pay him?
I don't know. It makes absolutely no sense to me. Because I've got this...
It's just they're hard on them. And especially one particular party in particular is harder on them than the other. And that's who controls the state of Tennessee. And the South is harder on them than other parts of the country.
Well, there definitely needs to be some reform, especially for this nonviolent. If it's a nonviolent crime,
95% of the people in that jail out there are nonviolent.
I mean, they've done what? Have a little bit of marijuana on them that's legal now?
Yeah, or couldn't pay a fine or violated probation or something like that. And we're paying what, $50, $60?
So I guess this guy that helps me, if he didn't go on that Wednesday to pay this guy $50,
they put out
a arrest warrant for him, and he'd be
back in jail.
And
we'd be paying $50 a night to keep him there.
Yeah, it makes no sense. It's stupid.
Now I may be off on my numbers, but
I may be too on his whether it's Wednesday or Thursday, but we're not off on the main thing. They just should not.
They don't have anybody advocating for that in government.
If there was somebody advocating for a big party or a big group then they'd get hurt. Mm-hmm. There actually is more advocates for finding UFOs than there is for figuring out why these people go back into jail for non-violent crimes that have just missed their parole meeting, and they weren't even out of town. I don't even understand what they've done wrong.
And of course, those people don't vote, so they don't have any influence.
They don't vote.
Probably can't vote.
They probably can't vote.
But to me, there's a major distinction between the felony and a misdemeanor.
And a felony is what?
It's violent crime. It's a major offense. A misdemeanor is minor.
Could you get a parking ticket and it be a misdemeanor?
I don't even think they call that a misdemeanor. No.
So
misdemeanor is supposed to be what, 12 months or less.
What would be a misdemeanor crime?
Lord, I'm not an attorney. You need to ask Logan that. It's less than 12 months you have to serve. Anything over 12 months.
In other words, a misdemeanor is
minor. Failure to appear in court.
Yeah. You were working.
Failure to pay your bond or pay probation.
So in other words, you get put in jail for a nonviolent crime, but you can't pay your bond because you don't have no money. You can't go to work to get the money to pay it, and you can't get a driver's license to drive to the work to get the money to pay the bond.
Well, one way to find it's in the paper every night. They put those people's names in the paper, which I don't understand. They tell you in there was misdemeanor, picked him up because he.
But they don't tell you it. I don't know. I never agreed with that either, publicizing what they did. Why is it my business what they did?
Why would you want visitors coming through town to pick up and see your jail docket and 10 most wanted?
Yeah.
I mean, the 10 most wanted, the number one is he forged $1,000 bad check or something.
Yeah.
And there's a picture mugshot in there. I wouldn't want people coming through my town to see that.
No. What are they trying to do? Brag?
They got mugshots of top 10 most wanted.
Yeah.
And everybody went to jail. Now, if you got connections, your name won't be in there and going to jail.
If you got money.
If you got connections. Money, connections.
It's all
smoke and mirrors.
Smoke and mirrors. And you think this is something that the Republican Party or the Democrat Party is trying to help, right?
Well, I don't know. There's no Democrat Party in Bradley County. It's gone. There's nobody trying to do it. As far as Bradley County. And on the national level, they got bigger fish to fry. Yeah. This isn't a Democratic-Republican problem. It's a community problem. And how do you want to treat the less?
So it's not a federal thing, these nonviolent crimes. It's more of just a local thing.
Well, I mean, the state laws dictates that, not the feds, state laws. But I mean, you take Chattanooga. You don't see in the Chattanooga paper who they arrested last night with their name in it, or the top 10 most wanted. But as far as the legislature in Nashville controls what is to be controlled about the state laws, and that's the ones that are too stringent.
Yeah. So who is in charge of it in Bradley in Cleveland? Who?
Well, your state representative and your state senator. You know who they are. I mean, they're the ones that go over and vote on that stuff.
Yeah. But anyway, it's a crazy, and that may be why some of the people are homeless. Maybe they just got in that rut and they can't get out.
You can't get out. I mean, if you don't have a car, if you don't have a driver's license, you can't. You don't have a driver's license.
You almost can't apply for an apartment if you don't have a driver's license.
And you got to have an old trunker, and you got to have a job. And to get a job, you got to have a driver's license and an old trunker.
Because there's no way out.
And instead of they make it harder to get it. I mean, they owe several $1,000 just to get a driver's license.
This guy that I know, he needs $1,500 to get his driver's license, and there's no way he can come up with that kind of money. Plus, he can't even hardly work. He doesn't have a driver's license. It's just a crazy thing. They ought to give him a temporary driver's license just to go to work. But really,
it's a vicious cycle.
But really, they can't even get to the place to get the driver's license while they're open. I mean, they're not even open the times that they're not working. It's just, I don't know how they do it. They're stronger people than I am, I guess. I guess I just quit.
It's a vicious cycle. It's hard to get out of.
I just have to quit trying.
It is a vicious cycle. Now, in South Georgia and other places I've lived, they'd have a place downtown, a park or something. Anybody wanting a job would go to that park. People like you, contractors and other small businesses, they go by that park at once. Anybody out here do anything? There'd be a bunch of them in that park. Mm-hmm. Anybody here do any plumbing or do this or that? They'd get workers out of them town, and they'd bring them back to that.
I always worry about doing that because you get, you got workman's comp, you got liability, and do you send them a 1099? Do you don't send them a 1099? You always got that problem. The whole system is.
Well, I don't think they use them regularly. So I don't think they do all that.
Yeah. Well, they're sure not going to get gainful employment there, but they might get them by for a few days.
Get them up, maybe give them one leg up.
You could almost deal with that if you were single, but if you had a family, I don't know what you'd do.
I don't know.
Now, years ago, they had the poorhouse. What was that? What did people literally go to?
They called it workhouse, I think. I heard it.
When did they stop the workhouse?
It was right over here.
I remember over by Cook's.
Yeah.
Well, that was the workhouse?
Right across from the American.
Was that people that were poor? Or
I think it was like the jail is now. Instead of sending you to jail and charging a fortune every night, they'd send you over there and you get up each day and go pick up trash or work your time off. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know about a poorhouse. I don't remember.
I just remember reading that they used to have, people used to say, you're going to send us to the poorhouse.
That might have been before my time. Now, growing up in East Cleveland, I can remember many times people knocking on the back door hungry, Mama taking them food.
You mean just random people?
Yeah, I mean people coming through the neighborhood or something. I guess you'd call them homeless. And they were nice and polite, knock on the back door and say, man, I'm hungry and don't have anything. You got anything to eat? You go bring it. They'd leave.
Was East Cleveland the place to live then?
No, it was across the tracks.
Still?
Oh yeah, it's still across. But it was more of a neighborhood back then, before Renewal went in there and planned it out. I mean, I grew up 2 doors down from the Watson's food store. Everybody over there wasn't poor.
Where was Watson's food store?
You remember Tip Top and all?
Yeah.
They all grew up 2 doors from me.
But that's not where the grocery store was.
Yeah, they had one over there. That's where they first started. Not the kids. The Watsons were all entrepreneurs, every one of them. There were a bunch of those kids' brothers, the older brothers. There was Bill. JB was their daddy. Bill had the motels. The other generation were all entrepreneurs. And Johnny and Jack and Joe, they got in the grocery store business. But their daddy had a small one over there on East Inman, right past your lot on the left, right there at the corner of Dooley and Galton and Inman. And then they sold it to Austin Watson, who ended up owning Watson Ford, that big Ford dealership in Chattanooga, Mountain City Ford. He was a Watson. There was a lot of people come out of what they call 6th Ward or East Cleveland that were very wealthy.
Now a lot of those houses. So back then it was really a neighborhood.
It was a true
neighborhood. Wasn't what we think of today.
I'll give you an example. I was born there, you can tell. You go 2 blocks east of me, and that's where the black community was. They lived east of me. West of me was white. South of me was white, but most of the blacks were east.
So they stayed right there.
Well, they had an area up in there, and there was some down in there behind where your lot is. About maybe 800,000. Well, I was born there, so I knew them all my life. 4 or 5, that age, or whatever. Well, it never dawned on me that I went to Allen School, which was a white school, over where Public Works Department is now. They went to College Hill. It didn't dawn on me.
Which was where was College Hill?
Where their community center is now, over there. They got a community. We turned it into a community center years ago.
Right, I know what you're talking about.
That was College
up by Mosley Park, up on the hill. Or go ahead.
So they went from 1st through 12th there. I didn't know that. It didn't dawn until I was about 10 years old. And every afternoon, 11, every afternoon after school, I'd go back home, and us white boys and black boys would play together. I had a lot of black friends. One of them's name was Richard. So we're out there playing one Saturday morning, and Mama hollered out back and said, Red said, time for the matinee at the Princess Theater. I always went there on Saturday morning, and I looked around and I said, y'all want to go to the Princess? The little white boy said, yeah, and the black boy Richard said, yeah. So we go home, we went running down to the Princess. So we go down there to give them our dime. They looked at Richard and said, you got to go upstairs. I didn't know that. Never had dawned on me why he didn't go to school. Felt bad, embarrassed. He goes upstairs. He didn't sit with him during the movie. When the movie's over, we come back out, and Richard's sort of quiet. And he's being raised by his grandfather. His grandfather was a principal of College Hill School. So he didn't say much. When he said, Richard, we're sorry. I didn't know you couldn't sit with us. I didn't. I was shocked. I didn't even think he didn't go to school with me. He never had. So about 2 weeks later, Richard said, y'all want to go to the movie Friday night? I said, where are we going? We're going to my house. He'd gone and told his grandpa what happened. His grandpa went out and bought an old wheel projector. He got some Western show and set it up at his house. And 4 or 5 of us right when we went over and put a nickel to watch the movie for consideration.
So it literally didn't dawn on you?
No, because I had no idea I walked in that theater. I didn't register. I didn't know why I didn't go to school. I didn't go to school. I played with him every afternoon. Just too young.
If you had had it to do all over again, what would you have done?
I don't know what else I could have done with what I did. Because, see, now that's the other thing. My parents never was discriminatory. Anybody, of course, my daddy was a precinct chairman. Party. He wanted there. But anybody walking up the street and then on the porch, they come in, they could eat with us. We were eating. So we never did. They could, I'd eaten with them. My daddy was friendly with them. They were friendly with my daddy. It just never dawned on me.
Mm-hmm. But that was standard.
Mm-hmm.
See, I couldn't imagine that today, not letting somebody in because of that. It would just wouldn't even. I wouldn't even think about it.
That'd be about 52, 1952.
Not that long ago. And it was that way till when?
Oh, I guess it started changing in the late 50s, I guess. Mid-50s, I don't know. Civil rights in the 60s changed it, everything.
Do you remember the Richard? Do you remember his last name or who he was?
I don't remember. I asked Avery Johnson. Avery Johnson's my age.
I like Avery.
He's my age. Not him all
Was he from that area?
Yeah. And by the way, I'll tell you.
I know Harry Johnson.
Yeah,
Are they related?
Yeah, they're brothers. Avery was my age. I think they're brothers.
No, I don't think they are. Harry was here yesterday.
Oh, not Harry. Avery's got a brother, but it's not Harry. Andrew.
Yeah, I know
Andrew. Harry too. I know Harry well.
Yeah, I like Andrew and Harry, and I know Avery. I like Avery, but Harry was here yesterday.
Well, Avery's my age, and Avery was raised by his grandmother, Miss Alice. And Miss Alice had a restaurant.
Where were they raised?
Right up there, right off Emmy Street, 6th Ward, we call it. All right in there where you're talking. Mm-hmm. And Miss Alice had a restaurant right there in the heart of 6th Ward, about 2 blocks from me. She had a jukebox in there, served food. And that was Alex Avery's grandmother. I think she raised it. And I had a younger sister, 3 years younger than me. So
this was mid-50s. or late 50s?
It'd be late 50s. She was born in 45, and she was about 13, about 58. And Jitterbug had come in.
About the time of Happy Days, the Happy Days TV series was set in 57.
Yeah, Jitterbug, it was on Jitterbug and everything.
Elvis.
Little Richard.
Elvis.
Little Richard. Man.
And Elvis, right?
Well, Elvis, yeah.
Had Elvis come out yet?
Yeah, he'd come out about that time. But Little Richard and the Jitterbug. So, Miss Alice had a jukebox up there. So my sister and some of the white girls would go up there and meet their black girlfriends. And they'd get in there and they would put that jukebox on and try to learn how to jitterbug. Well, the white boys, the black boys would come in there and aggravate them. So Miss Alice got tired of it, so she locked the door every day at 3:30 when they got home from school for an hour. Put the jukebox on free because y'all can't come in here for an hour so they could learn how to jitterbug.
And this was Avery's grandmother. And where was Avery at the time?
I don't know. He was my age. He was,
13.
Yeah.
16.
We were the same age. Yeah.
Did you know Andrew then?
I didn't. I knew Avery.
Is Andrew younger than him?
Younger.
How much younger?
I don't know. A few years. Might have been my sister's age. I don't know. But, yeah.
Where was that place at?
Right there on Inman, right across from the House of Happy Feet, just about 2 blocks.
Well, isn't that a restaurant now?
No, they wiped all that out too. It was on the left side, on the same side as your lot, right past that Golf Street on the left.
Okay.
There was all businesses right in there. There was a community.
Black community.
Yeah. And everybody went over House of Happy Feet and everything. And it got all wiped out, let Urban Renewal. They bought my parents' house.
What do you mean Urban Renewal?
There was a federal program called the Urban Renewal back in the 60s that went in and was supposedly going to redevelop the dilapidated part of towns.
Was it dilapidated?
No, not really. I mean the poor parts of town. They ran interstates through them in Chattanooga and stuff. Cameron Hill they wiped out. So they'd get grants. They're supposed to build them new houses and stuff, but it never happened the right way. They ended up buying my parents' house. There wasn't anything wrong with it. Houses all the way down almost to Wildwood and Inman down there. And it was a failure. They bought those houses and we saw them went back. Now,
so urban development was...
Urban Renewal.
Urban Renewal was who?
Federal government. The city got grants from the federal government to redevelop an area.
And so what they did was they came in and bought property. Did your dad wipe up, or did he just sell for it?
No, they appraised it and gave him fair market, and he went over there and bought him a place and off of Pierce Road.
So it wasn't
about 73.
Wasn't a windfall. So once they bought that,
they claimed they were going to widen the road, and they never did.
So it was a joke.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, wiped out some nice homes then.
Yeah,
they were nice, well-built houses.
In other words, they'd been better off to let your daddy keep living there.
In fact, that's a good floor plan. All those houses were built by Mr. Gillian, who was an old man when I knew him as a kid. He's kin to those Gillian Peaches and all of them out there. He was grandpapa of
Gilliland. Gilliland.
Okay.
Peaches.
He built all those houses. And many of them were built like my parents. It had 3 rooms on each side. It had 2 front doors.
Why is that?
I'll tell you why.
Because everybody wants to know why 2 doors on the front.
I'll tell you why. He had a front porch that went all across the front of the house. And he had 2 front doors and then 3 rooms on this side. A front door here and 3 rooms on this side.
A kitchen or just 3 rooms?
Well, kitchen in the back. You had 3 rooms to live in. One of them was a kitchen.
So 2 kitchens?
Yeah. A kitchen today then wasn't what you call a kitchen today, but yeah.
What did it have?
What it was a duplex.
But what would they use as a kitchen?
They had a little kitchen. I mean, it was basically a duplex.
But what was different from a kitchen we'd call today and the kitchen they'd call then?
Well, it wasn't that modern. You just had a sink and a refrigerator.
So you had a water connection?
Yeah.
And a drain?
Yeah, you had that. You had I saw ice boxes. You know, I used to go get ice from some of my neighbors. We had a refrigerator in the wagon.
So both sides had what I'd call a kitchen, but what you would call a water connection and a sewer connection.
They had, right. So, in the front door, and then you go. They come and cross each other in the back of the house, and they go up steps and 2 huge rooms upstairs, one on each side, with that beautiful old narrow wood paneling on the ceilings and the walls. So you had 2 big rooms upstairs. So you had 8 rooms in that house. And let me tell you, old man Gilliam built several of them, and they were wood framed, but they were big front porch, solid as a rock. Well, what Mama said they'd do. In fact, that's what Mom and Daddy did when they first got married. They rented one side.
Did it have could you go from one side to the other?
No, not when there was 2 units there. I mean, they were blocked off, I guess. They had doors that blocked off. You went in and out the front door.
But there's 2 doors, so if you went in one side or the other, could you go to other sides from inside?
Well, I never saw it as a 2-unit. I saw it. We lived in the house, and we had the whole house.
In other words, today, when you say duplex, I'm thinking of a $5,000 firewall where they inspect it 16 times to decide. You're not talking.
No.
You're talking about just the vision.
Yeah. We had doors, and I assumed they had doors. Then it just had a lock on them. You couldn't go that side.
Sure.
So Mama said you'd rent half of it. And then when you got more money, you'd rent the whole thing. So she said, we got half of it, and then we rented it all. And then when Daddy started making money, we talked the old man into selling it to us. So they bought it.
So Gillen built it?
Built all those houses up and down.
And rented it?
Yeah. He owned all those.
So your dad didn't own it?
Yeah, he bought it.
Oh.
When they moved here in the early 30s, they rented half of it. And then as they made a little money, they rented the whole thing. And then by the early 40s, he bought it.
From the Gillen.
Mm-hmm. And right next door to our house was a little one-room office that Miss Gilliam, and they were old when I was young, had a rent house. And they'd come from all over East Cleveland every Friday to pay the rent.
Did she rent it?
Most of their property they own. Most people in Pittsburgh rent. There are very few people own their own property. And most of it been built by Mr. Gilliam. So every Friday, when they got paid, they'd go pay their rent. And she was right next to us. And one day, old man Gilliam.
Is that where gas station is now?
No, if you're looking across the street at our house there, it would be right to the left of us. Right to the left. Right across the old Kaywood house next to it. Well, one room. And he owned all the houses in Sixwood. The individual didn't know. And when he was old, when I knew him, and he could limp around, he'd take him a shot. So you'd see him wobbling around Sixwood when I was a toddler. And one day I was walking up the sidewalk, and he fell over and hit those rock walls like they were everywhere over there. He hit his head on the rock wall, and he's bleeding. And I went running down the street 2 blocks from Miss Gillian. It was on a Friday. I said, his name was Frank. I said, he's fell up there, and he's bleeding badly. She looked at her watch and said, Red, I can't go up there right now. I'm collecting rent. It'll be 4 o'clock before I can get up there. They're coming here paying rent. Yeah. And by the time I got back up there, my mom and other people were out there wiping him off and getting him up.
So she wasn't going to wait?
No. But he owned about everything over there. Most of it.
He probably had one of those guys that kept cash and had it stored.
She handled all the money. He just walked around, wobbled around. He was old. But he built a lot of houses over
there. So whenever Urban Renewal came out, they
wiped all that out.
Yeah. And it did absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and we spent almost 40 years in that house. Solid as a rock house. Big house.
Cameron's is behind us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, it is. Our house is on part of J.T. Hahn's lot.
That your house is not still there?
No,
right?
It's that parking lot, right across from your lot.
Yeah.
Right across from your lot.
J.T. Hahn's, or Jason.
Yeah. Avery would be a good one in here to talk about the black community.
Avery's a good guy.
He could tell you the history of College Hill.
So he's born and raised in Cleveland, Tennessee, hadn't left, knows everything.
Went to work at 18 at Magic Shell and rose to be very high up.
Now, when you talk about, when did Magic, what about the industrial Cleveland? Has that helped anything, or when did that help, or if it hadn't happened, would it have helped?
Well, I mean, it's what fed those people over there. Dixie Foundry opened in 1915. Jackson Chair Factories and the foundries and that place where they all worked.
Why'd they call them then foundries versus we'd call them today a factory?
That was just because the type of work they did, where they molded and, created steel and stuff, I think. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I forgot it. I'll think of it in a minute. Go ahead.
But you're talking about the industry of Cleveland, when it came and
yeah,
did it help?
Yeah, it helped. I was going to tell you this. In the late 50s, that grocery store that Watson's used to own, right past your lot, 100 feet. I think there's one lot.
On the left?
Going toward 6th Ward from you. Your lot, next to your lot house was old Haggard clothing store, and next to it was a grocery store.
I wouldn't know that.
It was right there on the corner of that street. You could go. It was a grocery store, and it was Watson's for years. Well, back then, there was a neighborhood grocery store in every neighborhood. Austin Watson had one down on South Ocoee. The Watsons had one over there. When the late 80s...
Did the property have to be commercial, or was it...
No, there wasn't any zoning. We didn't have any zoning in this town in the 60s. No zoning. You can do anything you want to anywhere you want to.
Did it hurt or not?
Sometimes it might hurt a little bit, but I mean, it wasn't that bad.
In other words, zoning
does sometimes as much damage as it does good.
Right, yeah.
But anyway, I was going to tell you, you had these neighborhood stores. Everybody worked at the foundry, chair factory, or someplace like that. Everybody had credit. And my mother and the butcher had a grocery store up over there. Mama ran the register, and I delivered the groceries. I've been in every house from 6th Ward. And the butcher, man, from 58, 57 to about 60, Mama got out of it. It was Jim Payne. The lady went down the street. I asked Mama one time, I said, Mama, we were doing, in the late 50s, anywhere from $3,000 to $3,500 a week. When a gallon of milk was a quarter. And I said, Mama, did you ever lose any money on credit up there? She said, yeah. We lost $262 in 3 years. I said, really? That all you lost? She said, yeah, they died. Every Friday afternoon, they got their check. First place they went, pay you, they charge groceries for me.
What was it about the people? Did they just have a sense of...
They were honorable, they were honest, they were hardworking. But, you carried them a week, basically what you did.
You gave them a week, but they weren't going to beat you.
No. They come with that check next Friday. Paid in full.
Because they had to, or because they felt honored?
Who knows? Who knows?
But they did.
They did it. And it wasn't just there, it was all over town. I just think they were people of the world.
Do you think people have changed now from that?
Well, there's more of us, so you're going to have more bad. I'm not. There's still good people out there, but, a city of 10,000 is different than a city of 45,000. Everybody knew everybody. Too. You wasn't dealing with strangers.
So if you moved to Etowah, Tennessee today, would you have the same effects as you do here?
No, you couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't do it anymore.
But if I moved to Etowah, Tennessee, do they have homeless people? Or do they have?
They're not gonna get credit anymore anyway. It's a different world.
Why is that?
Things change. I don't know. I mean, it's not as simple as it was back then.
They're not nobody going to give you credit, right?
No. See, those people had been there all their lives. They wasn't going anywhere. You know, it wasn't transit. It wasn't people coming in and out. They knew their parents, their kids. You know, they all worked at the Stowe Foundry, black and white. You know, they wouldn't go anywhere.
So giving them credit for $100 at the grocery store was really not a big risk.
No, like I said, they did at least $3,000 a week for 3 years and lost $200 or $300. If you said the only reason they all said they died for it fast.
So what you're saying is people generally will pay you if they can.
Yeah, I believe that. I do. I mean, there's always a few crooks out there, but I think generally speaking, it's true.
No matter what era it is?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Shoe shine boy, well, we got a haircut, me and Daddy. He took me every Saturday to get a haircut. Every Saturday.
Where was that at?
George's Barbershop.
Which was where?
Right downtown. Right there near the police jet, near the old city police department. Jail. Right across the street. And Bob owned it. It was called George. He must have bought it from George. But I went every Saturday. And my daddy got my hair. And he got a shoe shine Sunday morning, Sunday church. But
so no matter what, Saturday morning, you got your haircut, you got the shoe shine. Mm-hmm. What time?
Wherever you took me, about the middle of the day.
After lunch?
Yeah. And
after the matinee?
And I know what I was going to tell you. Bunk was the shoe shine guy in there. And we had, he had a credit card store. You know. And he'd come in there on Saturday evening, take all his coins out and empty all of his pockets and his coin thing and pay his bill.
In other words, they weren't going to beat you.
They wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
They didn't even know where to go.
And didn't really have nothing to buy except just live, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just different world. And you'll be sitting here telling you.
Is it the people's different or is the world different?
The world's different. Different times.
Because I would never not pay my bill. But I would never either ask for credit unless I signed 15 documents.
Yeah.
But they would say, we'll pay you.
There was no
and
documents.
They would.
There was no documents. No. And we wasn't the only one. Everybody in town did that. MC Hedrick started out that way. When you start with a neighborhood grocery store, you had to have credit. No stamps.
You had to give credit.
Yeah, you couldn't make it.
Because what people were buying, they could not pay.
No, they were always running a week late.
Not 2 weeks? Just a week?
1 week. 1 week. Not 2.
What would it take for them to get 2 weeks ahead?
I never heard of it. I mean, I never remember anybody, like I said, missing a payment.
Yeah.
And I delivered the groceries to. We delivered the groceries to them. Got a
Did they tip you, or was that out?
Oh no, had a '57 Chevy. Delivered the groceries.
So you didn't hang around till they tipped you. You weren't expecting it.
No, I saw every little house in Citrus.
If they tipped you, you'd know it was.
No, they wouldn't know. They didn't know what tip meant. And nice people.
Yeah.
We lived in that house 38 years and never had a lock, never had a key. 38 years. And we would occasionally take a vacation. We went to New York City one time to see some of Dave's family. We went to D.C. one time. Went to Florida a few times. I only put a butter knife in the front door.
What do you mean a butter knife?
One of those old butter knives, about that wide, just slip it in there, It wasn't just a little, you just kick it in. Never had to key the door. Never had the first thing touched in 38 years.
Didn't even worry about it.
And Daddy was gone all the time in that truck. 3 or 4 nights a week. I was there with 3 or 4 kids. They read the first call.
Now you talked about this duplex, or this house being 2 front doors. Was there an upstairs?
Yeah, 2 big rooms.
Was there 2 stairs?
No. See, when we owned the house, I never saw that. When I was born, we owned the whole house.
Yeah.
But you come out of when you walked in our house, we had a living room on the right, a dining room on the second room, and a kitchen in the third room, and then a bath behind it. Or in the kitchen, you could walk through a hallway, and there's stairs going upstairs. And you had 2 huge rooms up there, one on each side.
Was there, so each side didn't have 2 stairways?
No, just one, yeah. And then if you didn't go upstairs and you just walked a few more steps, there was 3 more beds. We had 3 bedrooms there. A sister's bedroom, mine, and my parents' bedroom. So we had a 6-room house, 2 huge rooms upstairs.
And that was the way...
And a bath and a shower over there.
That was the way...
A lot of those houses were built.
So was it what Gilliland did, or was it kind of everybody always built that?
He built about all those houses. Mama said he built about every house in Cincinnati.
Did he? Was that standard across the country? That was sort of the thing.
I don't know. I just know there was a lot built like that over there, and I know he built most of everything over there. He was an old man when I was real young.
Frank Gilliland.
Uh-huh. He's kin to that Gilliland Peachers out there and stuff.
Yeah. Cleveland is a great place to be. Do you think that, talking about this, I know you're on the city planning commission. Did they have a city planning commission when you were at the city?
No. Oh, yeah, when I was at the city, we did, yeah. When I was at the city, yes.
How was the city?
They created the planning commission in late 60s.
What was it like then posting that? Because I was on it for a long time.
Craig Bivens was the city planner, and he worked for me.
I was on it when Craig Bivens.
Okay, then he worked for me. I hired Craig Bivens. I brought him. In fact, he worked for me in Cookville. When I worked for the state, yeah.
Was he from Cookville?
No, he was from Cleveland.
Okay. I like Craig.
He was from Cleveland, and I roomed with him in college at Middle Tennessee. And then later...
You roomed with Craig Bivens?
Mm-hmm. And Raymond knew him well. And then later, when I got into planning, I gave Craig a job in planning in Cookville. Craig had 3 jobs in his life. The first one I helped him get the DOT, Department of Transportation. The second one I gave him in Cookville, and the third one was Cleveland.
Where's he at?
He moved up to Loudon, Tennessee with his wife.
I hadn't seen him.
No, he don't come back. I never thought he'd leave town.
And he left and didn't even...
I never dreamed he would.
If he's listening to this today, hey, Craig.
Yeah, so I didn't have much to do with the planning commission when I was at the city. I mean, Craig ran it. I was more interested in Hall Huff and Tinsley Park, building stuff, developing stuff, planning.
You know, back to people. Do you think the city, the way they run things now, is about the same as it was? Or is it a different mindset? Or is it totally different?
It's totally different.
What's the difference?
Back then we didn't have a city manager. Eddie, Max, Harry.
So what did you have? City department?
We had 5 people, a mayor and 4 commissioners. The commissioner, like Eddie, was over roads, public works. Eddie was. Max was finance man. He controlled the money. Kenneth Tinsley was over parks and recreation and fire department. The mayor was over us, planning and development and that kind of stuff.
But he wasn't over everybody.
No. They had to vote. And he wasn't over everybody. Eddie hired his own people and stuff. And that wasn't a particularly good form of government. It's called the Board of Mayor and Commissioners. Because it divvies things up in a way. But those 5 guys made it work. Because they could sit down like we are. And they could work together. And they could come to some understanding. And they were honest with each other. So it worked pretty well in that touch. We were able to accomplish a lot. You know. Harry Deathrow had a favorite saying, like when we were in that annexation fight up here. And he said, "Now you know there's going to be 100 people out there in that room opposing us." But he said, "Now here's where I stand. I'm for annexing, and you know why? You've heard all the facts I have, and I think it's best for the city in the long term. I know it's not easy, but now I want to know. Tell me right now where you stand, because when we go out there, I don't want you moving on me. I mean, don't tell me one thing in the back room and something else out here." You know.
Yeah.
He said, "And here's what I'm going to do." And if he lost that one, he just dropped it and went on the next issue. But they respected him. And sometimes they disagreed with him. That's okay. Just don't tell me one thing and do something else.
In other words, he didn't want emotions to sway your thinking.
Well, he didn't want you lying to him either. He wanted you to know where you stood and stay there, as he'd put it. You know, that's what you're going to do. Stay there. Don't move on.
Do we have any? There's nothing. Is there anything in memorial of Harry Deathrow?
Nothing.
You know, I remember the planning commission rezoned that property on next to Lee College, and they agreed to put some kind of a plaque.
Yeah, you know.
Did they do that?
They did do it. Remember, I brought that up.
Yeah, you brought it up.
They did do it.
And they agreed to do it.
I went over and Jerome did it.
Boy, that's nice of him, wasn't it?
It sure was.
I mean, not nice of him.
Yeah, I mean, I went over and got a little plaque in the ground. I appreciate it too. They're sharp.
He did what he said he was going to do.
Yeah, Harry was mayor for 17 years.
That's a long time.
And longest one until Tom. And he never cared about his name or being anywhere. No, he didn't care.
Who was before him?
Before I got back here, there's been some very business people had that job over the years. Bill Philire had it for years.
Are you saying Harry Deathrow was?
He was a gentleman and a scholar, Harry Deathrow was. Well educated, calm, articulate, just a good, decent guy who had the best interest of the city at heart and didn't need anybody's dime or anything. Wealthy.
And
in fact, after a few years, he retired from Magic Shelf early and went to work full time at the city for no pay and bought all of his own firms.
So the only memorial for him is what Lee College put up over there on.
Yeah.
What's the name of that road?
Oh, Church.
That's the only memorial that we know of.
At his house. That's where he lived.
Now, speaking of Harry Deathrow, I'll tell you something else. Our good friend that died here recently, John Kennedy.
Yeah.
I miss him about once a week, don't you?
Oh. John Kennedy was one of a kind. One of the most unique individuals I've ever met in my life. Never met anybody quite like him.
It's funny that him and Raymond didn't know each other.
No, Johnny ain't gonna.
And they wouldn't have gotten along.
No, they were so different.
No, it's so different.
Daylight and dark.
No.
Two different worlds.
Two different worlds. But in the same time frame.
But
you know it.
And Johnny was like They had a lot of the same traits.
A lot of the same.
Johnny
traits.
marched to his own drummer, and Raymond marched to his own drummer. But they had different drummers.
They had different.
And I loved them both.
I loved them both too. John Kender was one of my best friends, and Raymond was too. John Kender liked me.
He loved me.
I loved him too.
He said, "Yeah, old dude, you come down here, you just sit and sit. And Mama, they just sit and sit. Pick my brain, yeah.
I've got his picture in my back. But that was it. Was that this year?
What?
Or last year that he died? This year?
He died in January.
It was during COVID.
January.
I know that, yeah.
January 5th. Yeah. Maybe March. I don't know.
I'd say John
March.
Kender and Raymond Wood.
No, he died in March.
It was right at the beginning of COVID. Speaking of COVID, what's your thoughts? What's your real thoughts?
I don't think it's fake. I think it's real.
You think it's a real disease?
Yeah, I mean, when these experts get on TV, like Fossey or whatever you think, I mean, I can't go on hearsay. I have to go on what people in the field say. They don't, you don't
think it's a scam?
No. I think it's authentic. I mean, that's just, they've always said that stuff about everything, I mean, they refuse to accept people who acknowledge what they're telling. I mean, why would anybody be, it's just so far-fetched I can't even comprehend it.
So if you go into a restaurant, you wear a mask?
Yeah. I mean, the reason it's as bad as it is, if you want to talk a little politics, is that Trump knew in January, February, that it was out there, and he did nothing. I mean, he
closed China.
He blames China for everything.
He closed China.
Well, it doesn't. What anybody would have done, what you and I would have done, if you're going to have a crisis, you got to come up with a national plan. You got to have a plan. You got to say, boy, it's governors. Let's get together. We got to come up with a plan. That thing's headed this way. How are we going to address it? And then you got to set some policies. The mask should have been put in place months ago. Everything should have been put in place months ago. He passed it all to the governors. 50 different ways to address it. That thing knows no borders. Should have been nationally addressed.
But the governors were saying, oh, we want to do this. And the other governors say, we want to do that. And they want to be independent. So he basically just threw it in their lap.
Well, when you get ready to fight it, war, you don't let the governors fight it. This problem affected the whole nation. You fight it along with the governors. You have a national plan where the governors do this and the national government does that. It's a coordinated plan. He passed the buck, all of it. And then he made it political. If you wear a mask, you're against it. That's crazy. All that did was spread it more. I mean, when an expert in those fields gets up and says, distance yourself, wear a mask, and blah, 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 why would they? And people say, oh, that ain't right. I don't understand it.
But if they had kept it closed, I guess these places have spread out population. So you're saying he should have said, everybody wear a mask for X number of days.
Now, what I'm saying he should have said, when he found out it was coming from China, we got to get ready for this. It's coming. And let's get together. I'm going to get together with my team and the governors, and we're going to come up with a national plan. I don't know what all that's going to do to address this problem.
So not in each, but now what about if California or one of the other countries, well, we don't want to do it that way. We want to do it this way.
Well, it depends on, for example, it hit New York in that area first.
Yeah, and bad.
Bad.
Yeah.
And you know what? Some governors did a good job. The governor of New York, Cuomo, it's down. He addressed it earlier. We sat down here and did nothing in other parts of the country. Just because you have a national plan don't mean every state has to do the same thing at the same time. But you got to have a plan, and you got to adapt and adjust it as the situations change. And he just simply said, what he said for months, he lied for months. He said, "Oh, it'll go away. I won't need more than 10 or 15 days. It'll go away. It'll go away. Don't worry about it." Remember that? See it over and over and over.
Yeah. But I'm not sure that he didn't do. You know, I mean, no, this had never had happened to anybody. Do you think it'll cost him?
Yeah, I do. I really do. I mean, it's serious. We had one in 1918. Look at pictures of them. They all had masks on. Killed hundreds of thousands of people. 1920, right? 100 years ago. Hell, they had it then we did now. I mean, all this other stuff. I don't know how people can believe all these theories when you've got experts. Those people on TV, I respect them. They're in that field, and they're like asking you about building something. They spent their life studying that stuff. They said this is a problem, and they've been right. They're going to go up, up, up. Over 160,000 Americans have been killed. People want to make fun of it. 160,000.
But, all right, what would their plan have been? What could the plan?
I can't tell you that. I mean, you know, you'd have to spend.
Maybe the plan would have been.
I'm not an expert on that stuff.
Maybe the plan would have been each individual state come up with their own system for their own individual state, because all states are different.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much power the government has to mandate. To me, the way I look at the pandemic, it's just like a World War II. You better get your act together, and you better come up with a strategy. And who leads that strategy? The U.S. government. It's a partnership with the U.S. government and the states in cohesion. Now, that doesn't mean that the plans are going to be identical in every state. It depends on the problems in that state.
But isn't that the difference? Doesn't that mean the state needs to handle it the way that? Aren't the governors in charge of their state? I mean, they want to be in charge. So if they're in charge, let them be in charge.
You can declare a national emergency. I mean, there's ways around that. I mean, the federal government can really do about anything they want to.
All right. So let's say they caused it a national emergency. And let's say he said, okay, we're going to make... The only thing I think he should have done is if they, with this PPP program, having it for 8 weeks and paying people for 8 weeks, he should have told people to stay closed for 8 weeks. I feel like the government had bought 8 weeks, and they should have stayed closed for 8 weeks. The only criticism I've got, if there's any, and I'm a complete Trump fan, but he did start opening it within 6 weeks, and maybe the 2 more weeks might have had some effect.
Well, let me say this. When disaster hits, when a tornado hits Florida, or a fire out west, big disaster, who comes? The federal government. Mm-hmm. The federal government, that's who comes. That's the only one that can handle something of this magnitude. And there's got to be things to protect people from. And if they want to believe these fairy tales, I tell you why New York's down. Because they imposed a bunch of stuff on them. Discipline, mask requirements. I mean, all that works. It works. New York's going down, everybody else is going up, and other states have gone down and did that.
So you're saying the government putting in the interstate system was a social problem. So was Social Security was a social problem. And wearing a mask and shutting down is a social problem.
Well, I don't know.
Or a government thing.
It
just like a war is.
Yeah, you killed 160,000 people. That's 3 times what we lost in Vietnam.
But who says that's what they died of? I get conflicting things on that. I mean, Elon Musk says the data's wrong.
That's because people have an agenda. They have an agenda. They're not being objective. They have an agenda against are supporting.
So you the only thing you can go on is who has the agenda.
What I go on is the scientists, the people who have no axe to grind, not the politicians.
But when you go to Fauci and you go to these other people, they differ, and the people that are even experts in the field differ.
Very little, very little, very, very little. They all, everyone I've heard say, wear a mask, do the distancing. You know, every one of them that I've seen.
So if they wear a mask and close down the government, it just theoretically, this is absolutely not going to happen. But theoretically, if a country comes in and says, hey, our army is not afraid of COVID, we're going to come in anyway. Do they take over our country because we were afraid and they weren't? And is that the same thing as our economy? Our economy's got to be strong, and we got to be working, and if we don't work, then they're going to take over. And don't we need to fight this thing just like the people charged the Omaha beaches back then? Don't we need? I mean, be safe. But
first of all, no army's going to come here and take us over. I mean, we're the most powerful.
In theory, well, right now,
it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, we're the most powerful.
So if they just said, okay, let's shut everything, close everything for 6 or 8 months.
But all we're doing is being hypothetical. We're just trying to wonder what could happen. The point is, I don't know. I'm not no expert in this stuff. What I do know is that when you have a crisis, you better have a plan.
But nobody
have a strategy.
But nobody had ever had this happen before.
It doesn't matter. We never had fought World War II before. But we had a plan when we got there. We never had seen anything like it in our life. There's a lot of things we've never seen in our life. But when tragedy hits, you got to get the best minds in the country together. And you can't run around and say for months, oh, nothing's going to happen. There won't be 10 or 15 people die. He said that for months. Oh, it's going away. It's going away.
Well, he said it for 2 weeks.
It's going away. He's downplayed it from day one. Downplayed it.
He has downplayed it.
And it's a crisis. And it's been a crisis since day one. Mm-hmm. And it should be addressed. And I don't know what the plan's going to say. I have an idea what it's going to say if you listen to experts.
Which is what?
Mask, spacing. I mean, they shouldn't have opened these places back up. Even I know that.
What about the county schools?
They're sending them to school without a mask. They've already got how many's called it already?
15, 20?
How stupid is stupid? I mean, my Lord. I mean, they're not even following the guidelines that everybody recommends. And they've made it politics. Trump has made it political. He refused to wear a mask all those times out in those rallies, out in Omaha and stuff. He was making it political. There's nothing political about it. It's a crisis. It's killing people.
Well, we got to say, there's theories that say if somebody dies in a car wreck, but he had one of the 100 symptoms of COVID, then they write it as COVID, even though they're not tested. I just think that if they would give us true data, then true information about who dies because of COVID, then we could make the call.
There's what you've got is conspiracy theories. Now, and I don't have all the facts, and I haven't studied it, but I do know that, for example, they pay the hospitals a little bit more if a person dies of COVID.
Yeah.
And the reason they do, it's logical. It's because I'm just a believer in listening to scientists. I mean, I don't know anything about COVID, but people take something like a hospital getting paid a little extra for COVID, and they should be paid extra for COVID because it's more work for them because of everything they got to gear up for. And they take that and twist it into the fact that their hospitals lying about the deaths because they get paid more for COVID. I've heard that everywhere. Well, the hospital's not the one that signs the death certificate.
Who signs the death certificate?
some doctor.
I thought the, on the.
I mean, you don't have the hospital administrator. You've got a doctor that's treating you.
On Quincy, he was the only one that can sign the coroner.
Yeah.
Isn't he the only one that can say cause of death?
Well, I think a doctor, if he's treating you or whatever, can, somebody to deal with it. But they're not cooking any books. They're not making this stuff up. I don't know why people want to play these fantasy games. Well, part of it's Trump. Because, lies. Over and over and over. He stretches everything. He tries to shift the blame. And I think you should follow wherever the intellectual doctors and advisors tell you to go.
But had he just closed the country down,
I'm not going to be hypothetical and look at those kind of options. I got to look at reality. What can we do to address this crisis?
And I think he didn't. I think he did the best he could.
He didn't do anything. He turned it over to the states.
Although
some states did better than others. New York did fine. Some of the other states did fine. The South hadn't done too good. We were last to get hit, and we're getting hit the hardest because we wasn't ready for it. And we didn't put the proper rules in place. Because Trump said, I don't want, no mask, no, he didn't lead by example. He should have been wearing a mask.
But if the back in the Civil War or whatever, the general always charged in front of the people.
No,
I think it would be a hard.
The general didn't. Robert D. Lee wasn't out front. They're in the back. They're back there at headquarters.
I think it'd be a hard. I really feel like when I come during that worst part, March, April, all that, I'd come in every day at 5 o'clock. I'd turn on and I'd listen to him. He'd have Fauci, he had that lady, he had Pence, and he had him. He'd tell us exactly what happened, what's going on, and what the plan is. And I really feel like he kept things together, kept people calm. And I'm not sure that if the facts were all laid out, that this thing has killed much more than secondhand smoke. Because there's over 50,000 a year die from secondhand smoke.
That's irrelevant. Secondhand, it's irrelevant, whatever people die of. The point is, what damage is the virus doing? And now, the virus is killing people.
Do you think they're going to come up with a vaccine soon?
I do.
What would you say?
Well, I don't know.
6 months?
I just know what they say on TV. The guy, whatever his name is, he said what? Hope to have one by the end of the year. What's his name? I can't hear.
Fauci?
Fauci.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of people you need to listen to, not Trump talking about that. Not Trump. What's that old drug he wants everybody to take? Everybody tells you won't work.
Hydrochloroquine. And this morning on
crazy.
On Good Morning America, I believe it was, they were talking about how they're actually combining that with something else. But
have you ever heard Fauci or him say take that drug? No. No, you're not going to.
But let me ask you this. Eddie Cartwright was here last week. We was talking about he goes to church and they're going outside and they're honking the horns for amen. If they come up with a drug, with a vaccine, whether it be January or June, either way, it's almost irrelevant, right? Whether it's then or then will we all be okay? Will these people that are wearing a mask line up to get the shot? Or what if they say, because if one person dies of this vaccine, they may not take it either.
Well, they're ignorant.
So you're saying if they come up with a vaccine, and if you can take it, then we're good.
I'm going to do whatever Fauci and the experts tell me what to do. Not Trump or not some person that's trying to misdirect or misinform. Or
how do you know the ones that are trying to misinform?
Well, the ones you just talked about a while ago that said, the question the virus, and how many people have died, or this or that. We were talking about a while ago. the example about the reason they're lying about the number because the hospital, they get paid more. I've heard that everywhere.
Yeah, I've heard that everywhere.
Well, that's smoke and mirrors.
Are they getting paid more?
Yes, I just told you.
So if they're getting paid more,
they're getting paid, but they're not the ones that signed the death certificate. They're getting paid more because the treatment costs them more. All the gear and everything they have to put on. My girlfriend's son has talked extensively about taking 30 minutes to get.
You got a girlfriend?
Okay. But anyway, I'm saying it costs them more, so they pay them a little bit more. It's just like your job.
Sure, yeah. If it's
but they
3
use
stories
that
high,
and twist it. But the people use that and twist it and say, well, they're lying about how many's dying because they make more money.
I've heard that from everybody.
Yeah, it's rumors. It's not factual. I mean, it's not true because they're not the ones signing the death certificate, the hospital, and you can't cook the books on the dead. You know, they don't believe there's 160,000 dead. Well, they don't believe there's 12 dead in Cleveland. We know them. You know. Mm-hmm. I don't understand why people would even question it. Won't they just do what?
So you're saying stay 6 feet apart, wear a mask if you're around crowds, and if they get a vaccine, take it, and then forget it.
Yeah.
Very simple.
Don't
3
start
steps.
rumors and lying and stretching facts.
Wear a mask, stay 6 feet apart. When they get a vaccine, take it, and then forget about it.
Yeah, I think it was my policy may have had one more thing in there. I don't remember. Yeah. I mean, you know, instead of stretching the truth and fibbing, and I'm gonna quit Facebook because it's nothing but lies. I mean, I've never seen so much junk and garbage and misinformation in my life. It gives me a headache.
I can look up a pair of shoes, and the next 3 days I'll have 3 shoes, different color, better price than I advertised. But let me ask you this, Larry. I remember, speaking of Raymond, I went over to your house one night. You and Raymond were out on your gazebo. Y'all were talking. And I had evidently come into a conversation that was semi-private. And it happened to be about your son. Tell me about that. I know you told me, but I want to hear about it from...
he just called.
Oh, was that him?
Yeah. His name is Wayne Black.
He looks just like you, by the way.
And
I mean, he looks more like you than you do.
When Raymond and I were in college at Middle Tennessee, I had a steady girlfriend for about a year and a half. And she come to me after about a year and a half, right before Christmas break. And she lived 10 miles down the road in Smyrna, Tennessee. And she lived with her father. Her mother had died when she was young. And she said, Larry said, I'm living with Daddy and I need to get away from home. I'm going to transfer to UT Knoxville. And I said, I hate to see you go. Blah, blah, blah. And gave her a hug.
Did you love her? Or?
Well, I mean, I'm young and, hate to see her go. I didn't know how she, I didn't think anything about it. Just, they said girls.
Yeah.
So we go to Christmas break. I never see her again.
Never saw her.
Never seen her since.
Never hadn't seen her since. That was the end of that story.
And so about 10 years ago, I was sitting out there in that gazebo with Joe Evers. It was a Friday afternoon, and I had a guy working with me inside, and he came out in the gazebo and said, "You know a guy named Wayne Black?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, he wants to meet you. He's inside."
So you was out in the gazebo with Joe Edwards, and the guy was in your house.
Yeah. And so I said, "Joe, I'll be back in a minute." So I go in there and I see this big tall guy. I didn't think about him favoring me. I thought he sort of favors my son Chad that died.
Yeah.
And he looks a little bit like Chad, except he's taller. And he said, "Are you Larry Presswood?" And I said, "Yes." And
he thought he was the FBI, didn't he?
And he said, "I'm Wayne Black from Atlanta." And I could tell he was fidgety and a little nervous. I said, "Well, sit
now,
down."
what year is this? This was
about 10
2007
years ago. About 10 years
or 8? Probably
about 10 years ago.
Maybe 7, maybe 12 years ago.
Yeah, I can't remember. So I said, well, sit down. I could tell he was nervous. I thought, damn, this TBI or FBI, have I done something with this IRS?
Did they find
out?
Nervous.
Made me nervous. So finally he sat down and he said, do you know a girl named Harriet Huey? I said, yeah, her nickname was Candy.
And this was how many years ago?
He was born, he's your age, he was born in 66. And this
You're what, 80? 78? 78? So
he was born in 66, and I met him in 2010 or 2009.
Either way, you're 22 years old.
Yeah.
You're trying to remember this name.
Well, I know I remember the name, never did forget the name. Never did.
Why?
I don't know. Just she was a serious girlfriend. You never had that name.
Yeah.
Harriet Huey. And her nickname was Candy.
Her name was what? Harriet?
Harriet Huey, Hughey. So anyway, she was tall. And he sat down. He said, well, according to my birth certificate, Harriet is my biological mother, and you're my biological father. Well, I mean, I just went.
It's like everybody's nightmare, right?
Oh, Lord. I was so weak I couldn't move. It was Friday afternoon. We talked a bit more, and I said, I got to go tell Joe Evans. Be back.
Yeah, because Joe's still out in the gazebo.
So I said, Joe, I've got something bad happening. I'll talk to you later. So he left. So we talked for about 30 minutes.
Fellow Democrat, by the way, right?
Larry,
Joe's a fellow Democrat, right?
No, Joe's Republican.
Oh, he's Republican? Okay.
Yeah. I don't think he is. I think he's mellowed out in his old days. He used to be a Republican.
I believe he's a Democrat. But go ahead.
My son's a big Republican.
Yeah, I believe Joe's Democrat. But go ahead.
My son, he's made enough money. He's done become a big Republican. You got to get to a certain point where you switch.
Yeah.
But so we talked for about 30 minutes, and he tells me, he said Harriet came to Atlanta. She went and told her daddy, told his mama, biological mom, told his mom, daddy, she was pregnant, and she had one sister that lived in Atlanta, an older sister. So her daddy sent her to Atlanta to stay with her sister.
Because you had gotten her pregnant.
Because she was pregnant. And so she stayed with her sister, had the baby, put it up for adoption, and then did go to UT Knoxville and graduated. Went on with her life. So, 10 or 15 years before he ran me down. He ran her down.
What had happened to him? He had been adopted, I guess?
Yeah, he was adopted.
By who? By who? Regular?
By a couple. I met his adopted mother.
Were they nice people?
She was still alive when I went down.
Were they nice people?
I didn't know the daddy, but the mother was very nice. Yeah.
Was he happy with that?
Yeah, they were good people.
So why was he seeking you out?
Well, because he wanted to know his biological parents. What he told me was that when he got married and his wife got pregnant with the first child back in 93, 94, he wanted to know who his biological parents were, if no other reason, for health reasons.
That's a big reason.
So he ran her down, and she met him in Chattanooga. She lives in Franklin, Tennessee.
He ran her down?
Yeah, first.
What was that like, reckon? Did you say?
Well, he said they met in Chattanooga. And he talked to her. That was several years before he ran me down. And he's been around her. I think she come down there once or something. He's been around her some, but not a whole lot. In other words, he doesn't have the bond today with me, with her, that he's got with me.
Wonder why?
I don't know. But anyway, she's cordial with him. He called her here a while back and said, my daughter's playing volleyball in Nashville. We thought we'd come by and say hello. And she said, sure, come on by. But she doesn't make any effort. In fact, she never had any more kids. But she went and adopted a kid. 10 or 15 years younger than him.
Have you ever talked?
I have never talked to her. Not once.
I would have to talk to her.
I don't think she wants to talk to me. So now, her husband died. She did later marry. They had no kids, but they adopted kids. And her husband knew Wayne was their biological son, and he was a nice guy, Wayne said. But the kids didn't know it, But anyway, and Wayne told me then, he said, I've tried to find you before. He said, I stopped over on Centenary Avenue a couple times.
I remember when you lived on Centenary.
And he said, I rung the doorbell. I was on my way to UT Georgia game. And he said, I was going to lie. I just wanted to see what you looked like. And then said, I'm sorry, I got the wrong number. So he tried a few times, but never had caught me till then. So after we talked for about an hour, I was just so weak. I said,
and it had to be absolutely devastating.
Huh?
That had to be devastating.
Well, it was earth-shattering.
Yeah.
And so after about an hour, I said, you want to go by the Elks and have a drink? He said, yeah. So we went down to the Elks and opened the door, and I walked in the bartender and looked at me. Is that your son?
I've seen pictures of him. He looks like you when you were young. Yeah. Identical.
So he's been a lot of help to me on a lot of things since I've been sick. He's come up here and he's handling all the doctors for me. He checks on me. And, some of this stuff gets complicated, and I've given him all the
But
power.
You haven't said one time that, so he's in contact with the mother.
Occasionally, not like me.
But if I was you, wouldn't you have to call her and say, hey, what's up?
I don't think she wants to talk to me.
I wouldn't care. I'd say, hey, we got a kid together, and I don't know.
I just let things be bygones be bygones. She never has to call me.
And she lives in Knoxville?
Brentwood. Hoity-toity.
So she'd gone back and then went back?
Yeah, she went to UT and then she lived in Nashville. She was a web designer, commercial. Mm-hmm. She majored in art and web, that kind of stuff. And she and her husband owned the company. He died a few years ago. So she lives in Brentwood, which is a hoity-toity place.
When you say hoity-toity, you mean
high-end.
High-end. Blue blood, we call it. Well, that's interesting. So I remember I was with.
And by the way, we have built a tremendous bond in the last 10 years. We're close. We talk all the time. Me being sick, he's been up here several times. My granddaughter's been up here. Kay was in Florida for 3 months when I was sick, so they come up here and looked after me.
I would say that when I found out about it through you and Raymond, he's seen you more than I have since it.
Yeah.
So that's how.
Yeah, he has.
You just can't get rid of that.
I don't think Raymond ever met him.
I don't think he did. I don't think
he wanted to meet him.
Raymond told me he knew when you were dating that girl.
We lived together.
Oh, you lived with her?
I lived with Raymond.
Oh, yeah.
We had 2 rooms in an old house over there. Big old house. And I had one room and he had another room. And that's where we'd go. Our girlfriend. Raymond was there when it happened.
Yeah.
Didn't know it, but he was.
I can't believe that you wouldn't at least call the lady and say, hey, we've got a kid together. I mean,
I'd have to ask Wayne about that, but I don't think that she wants me to do that.
Well, I don't know. It seems like I don't know. I just can't imagine that, but I guess it's different.
But he's really has been a godsend. Of course, I lost the only child I raised.
Yeah, I know.
And then, now I got sick. He's been a big help.
You're not sick. You're just getting older. I mean, you got ailments when you get older.
Well, I've been in and out of the hospital, and he's been up here checking on me.
If you want to stay alive, stay away from doctors.
Well, you don't have much choice sometimes, do you?
Why not?
Well, you got a real problem. You got to address it.
What problem you got?
Well, I got the heart thing, and then I've been losing blood. And they've stopped it in the bowels, and then they found it in here.
The doctor or the surgeon? or is there a difference?
The doctors, as far as I'm concerned. And then now I got they think it may be, I may not be making enough blood. So they're going to go in and do that thing in the back and look at the bone marrow.
Does it worry you?
Well, I hadn't been too worried, but when they mentioned, I kept thinking if they could find all the leaks, it'd build my blood back up. I'm anemia. I don't have much energy. And I thought they could get my blood back up, but it's not going back up enough. It's only 8 something. They think they found all the leaks.
You seem the same to me.
I'm very pale and I'm very weak, and I've lost, I'm down to 170 pounds.
Well, that's just summer.
No, I mean, that's 30 pounds less than I was. But anyway, they're going to go in and look at the, I don't know enough about blood, bone marrow to talk about it really, but they're going to check and see if there's no problem.
Does it worry you?
No, I don't worry. I mean, it doesn't nothing to do about it. Try not to worry about what I can't change. I would like to have a little more energy.
So you're low on iron?
No, my iron's back up. Blood levels, my blood count's low.
Because you're losing blood.
I was losing. First time they found some in here. Last time they found some in the bowels. And they think they got it all. But they ran 5 more tests the other day. They called me just the other day. Now I got to go to oncology up here and see what they say, because they think the bone marrow thing may not be producing enough blood. Not losing it.
Is it the bone marrow that produces?
Yeah. Something to do with your bone marrow.
You look fine to me.
I feel, and I don't know where all this stuff comes from. Looking at my picture up there, I feel like I'm albino or something.
No, it's just this LED.
Well, I had my girlfriend put some makeup on before I come. I'm vain like Raymond.
Raymond would have had it figured out before he got here.
I miss Raymond.
We'd have had to go to him.
I miss Raymond.
I do too. I wished I could ask him 10 questions.
I miss Raymond. Miss him a lot.
But, we're a member of the Liars Club, or Liars Table. We go every morning. What time you get?
I haven't been much lately since I've been sick. I was out there one day this week. First time I've been out there in a month.
Me and you both go about once every 2 weeks.
Yeah, I don't.
Wouldn't you
say?
say?
Yeah, I don't go out. And I went the other morning early, and there wasn't nobody there.
Well, there's a reason they call it the Liars Table, because everything you hear is probably a lie.
Yeah.
And they know everything, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Of course, it's not the same anymore. It doesn't seem to be.
When do you think it's different? How do you think it's different?
Ever since Troy died.
I love Troy.
Ever since Troy died.
I love Troy. I've got his picture.
I remember you used to have it.
I've still got it. I had it blown up, lifestyle, and I had it made 4 inches taller than him, just to spin it a little bit.
Troy was a character.
I love Troy. I love Troy.
What got him? Heart?
Non-alcoholic sclerosis of the liver.
That's unusual.
Troy Dixon, John Paul Douglas, Raymond, and John Kendrick were the smartest people that I have known. Now, there may be smarter people.
I liked all of them.
But they were the smartest people I've known.
I love John Paul.
And I've known a lot of people.
I love John Paul. I've known John Paul all
John
the time.
Paul was...
We grew up in the same little church. I've known John Paul since
Community Hall?
Since I was that high. I love John.
Troy was smarter than John.
It depends on the subject.
It depends on the subject. Troy Dixon and John Paul, I guess I was closer than Raymond. But, man, I just loved them. Both of them. I just know. It's just unbelievable. I can't explain it.
So I know he didn't drink, or very little.
Who?
Troy.
No, Troy didn't drink. Troy was no. That's why I call it non-alcoholic. I don't really know what he had. I just know I was there. I was there when he died. I picked his body up with the funeral people to take it to the hospital. That's how. I mean, that swing outside is Troy's. I got his picture. I got his other picture in there. His picture's in the lobby.
Yeah, he was one of a kind too.
He was one of a kind, smart, and not extremely outgoing. So that was made for an odd combination.
Yeah.
He had one saying that I never will forget. He used to say, "Let them do it." And every now and then I have to say that. Let them do it. When it's not your responsibility and you worry about trying to get it done, sometimes you got to say, let them do it.
He didn't live to be old, did he?
I guess he was 67 or something.
Yeah, he wasn't very
I
old.
miss him so bad. I can't hardly think about it.
He wasn't very
and
old.
John Paul too. John Paul was.
Yeah. He was sort of your mentor, wasn't he? John Paul.
John Paul, Troy Dixon, Gene Officer, Raymond, Lynn Rams.
Gene just keeps on trucking, doesn't
he? Gene's a good guy. John Kinder and Larry Presswood.
Well, I'm glad to be in the elite group. Are we through?
I believe we've about said everything.
I hope you don't put all that on there.
We're good. We good? That's a wrap.